welcome back to the S38 Fire Team webcast, podcast, YouTube, whatever you want to call it. I am here. My name is Dre Zoom, aka Carl Legister. I have my good man Adam Armour, aka Slick Top City, aka Wolf. I have Brooklyn Taylor, brand chief ambassador, CEO, and very good friend of mine. All of them are Adam and Brooklyn. And we're going to get things started this week. We're going to do something a little bit different, which everything is different at this point. It's only third episode, technically. But we're going to talk about, as gentlemen of our age and demographic, if you will, our demo, we are, there's been a, within the last couple of years, a generous appreciation for 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s era automobiles. And just like we kind of talked about in the last few, we chopped it up last few times, that era of automobile, we're not going to see that again. Okay. We're not. The cars that we own, when us old BMW heads, and I use that term very loosely because I know there's some guys that look at us be like, is that an E28? Young whippersnapper? That's that term is relative, but the cars that we have and that we've invested our time, love, money, energy into, we know that BMW and these other manufacturers aren't going to produce those vehicles again in that vein. And so it really envelops you into this world of appreciation for them, and it every day it just grows and grows and grows because you realize that you can't go back to the dealer and buy a naturally aspirated 6-cylinder manual rear-wheel drive car, not just from BMW, but almost I can't think of a manufacturer that has that formula right now on their on their stat sheet. So we're going to talk about cars from the 80s that we love. Okay. And we're going to talk about them. We're going to explain why we love them. Adam, you're a guy who owns quite a few cars from the 80s. What do cars from the 80s mean to you?
The cars from the 80s mean that literally they're from a different time. The world was different financially. The world was different in communication and travel. And I think in the 80s, we really started to see more of an international feel to the world. The world started getting a little bit smaller in that regard. And I wouldn't say that we were quite at the global feel that we have now, with just about everything. But we were starting to kind of feel that. And I think that really showed in the automotive offerings that we had in that time.
Absolutely. I completely agree. It was a different era. And to your point that globally, with things like the wall comes down, end of the Cold War. Brooklyn, you have a little blend there. You have some cars that bleed over into the 90s, but you're a little bit I'm gonna put you on front. So you're older than us, so everything's a competition. So those couple of weeks that you were out of the womb before us, what did you experience in the 80s that led you to appreciate those cars?
Being a little kid in the 80s, I think we're all basically lived the same life. Car magazines, cars on the wall, they just represented so much freedom. My brother is 10 years older than me, so him and his friends had these cars. Like my brother had an E21 BMW. He had like a Hyundai Excel manual, right? His friends had really cool cars like Mazda MX-6. Everyone had cars like Maximas and Cressidas. Those were like, it'd be like having an S-Class or something now. I mean,
Right.
It's just the difference. You saw someone in their 20s with a new Maxima or a new Cressida, and it was just, off the charts, out of this world.
That's what I was
So, the 80s were a time of technological leaps. You know, people had 944 turbos. You know, they were just really, really cool cars. And they were trying to be futuristic. So some cars had, like, Japanese cars had digital dashes, and, you know, Alan spoke about his dad's 80s Maxima that would talk to you. I didn't know anyone who personally had one, but the car would talk to you. And that was like a big thing in the 80s. So, you know, there were just it was magical. It wasn't an appliance. The cars weren't appliances to me. It was magical. It was a magical time to be a young automotive enthusiast.
Absolutely. And that's when, you know, the three of us here, there's an appreciation, you know, the Radwood movement, the just the, like I said, the appreciation of cars that now that us, you know, if we want to call it Gen Xers or wherever we're at, now that we're in a position where we can go back and say, hey, I had this car on my wall. Now I can go out and buy it. You know, I've done my time in the, you know, the gross forgetter SUVs and the minivans. Now it's time for me to play. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and kick things off, and I'm going to show you guys a car that you're going to see it and be like, yeah, I know that. And that's a cool car. But then I'm going to break it down to another level and show you why it's not the car that you think it is and why it's so great. This is the part where a stripper jumps on the screen and starts
Right.
shaking. Yeah,
Right.
all right, yeah.
Can't wait to see what you selected.
So this right here is the 1989 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am, is the GTA. So the GTA had the 88, 89, if I'm not mistaken, year had a couple different Trans Ams. You can get a V6, boo, nobody cares about that. And you could get the 20th anniversary edition that had the 3.8 liter V6 turbo from Buick that they had in the red hot GNX, right? Pontiac said, we'll put that in here. And that car was literally the fastest car in America. 0 to 60, I think it was sub 5 second or very close to sub 5 second. It was a beast of a car. I think they only came in white, you know.
And it was just called the Trans Am 20th anniversary.
It was the 20th anniversary. You know, that was what it went by, right? Very cool car. But this is just goes to show you how things were different in the 80s. Pontiac also had the GTA, which had the 350 5.7 liter small block GM motor in it, right? Which, you know, for the time being, at the time was, and visually the cars were the exact same. They had the same BBS cross-spoke wheels. You see the fat lip. You see the vents on the hood, the T-tops. But this car was so cool. And, you know, I love the 20th anniversary edition, but look at this car. And, like, you're going to figure out why I like this car, right? What does it look like? Knight Rider, right? So this was about as close as you could get to Knight Rider, performance-wise, looks-wise. You know, black on gold is a classic look. You're talking JPS. You're talking, you know, even the Indy cars of that era had the same type wheel treatment. And it just looks sinister. You know,
it's beautiful.
It's just, you know, it reeks mullet, but hey, you know, I can deal with that. You know, you give me enough time, I can grow a mullet for you. This car is absolutely phenomenal in terms of design. One of the greatest 80s GM designs that ever was. And I'll tell you why. The trunk, well, it's not the trunk, it's the hatch, the rear hatch. You know, when I was a young bag boy at Winn-Dixie, I was 15, 16 years old, and the customers, they would have this. I didn't even realize that you could have a power closed trunk, and you just put the hatch down and you just rest it on the lock, and it goes. And the first time I seen that, I was like, this is a transformer. It's about to transform. I was like, this is the wildest thing I've ever seen before in my life. The interior is, leaves a lot to be desired, and realistically speaking, the performance of the car isn't that great. You know, for the era, it's good. For the era, it was actually pretty good. But it's a car that really stood out during that era for me, because this was Pontiac's, 80s. This is the best that they have been, because now we have the introduction of fuel injection, the emissions regulations. They were figuring things out a little bit better. We went away with there was no more big bumper requirements. And this is from the factory. Look at this car. This thing is absolutely phenomenal. So that's the first car that I wanted to show to you guys. Adam, do you have any memories of a car like this?
No, just the Knight Rider feel that you were talking about. And as a matter of fact, it's funny that you mentioned that it had the same drive line or the same engine as the GNX. I didn't know that. But truly an iconic car, and something that is worthy of remembering.
Yeah, for sure. It was a phenomenal car. I'm going to show you the stats here in a second. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Let's see here. Oh yeah, there we go. So this is from you can hardly read it, but I'm sorry, I was trying to zoom in on there. But Motor Trend, they had a competition in the 80s, which was called Bang for the Buck. Love where that. They essentially gathered all of these cars that were, they had a price range, and they divided basically the car's performance versus the how much it cost you, to drive that car. The Trans Am GTA didn't win, but what was really interesting is that they also had the 20th anniversary in there, and it competed right next to the GTA, which you can see the GTA as they're just rearing back on its hind legs there. I looked at the stats, 0 to 16, like 6.5 seconds. It was really middle of the pack for everything, but just a cool car. Absolutely loved it. One of my favorite cars of all time. I can't say enough about the Trans Am GTA. It's just a really, really, really cool car. So that's my first car that I would like to present. Let me hop right here into the second one. And you guys might be like, well, we know you're going to pick that one. But this one is really, really cool as well. Most people would probably understand and know and can talk about or be familiar with Group B in the 1980s and what it meant to rally racing. In the late 70s, early 80s, Renault, they had this, well, in the 70s, they had a like a sedan three box type car, not too different from the 2002, but they, hatches in Europe are different than hatchbacks in the United States. And to make a hatchback in Europe during the late 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, that's a car that everybody and anybody, completely accessible to everybody. And the Renault in the United States, it was called the Le Car. Okay. Literally, the name of it was the car. That's what it translated to. And it was the first car that true story, it's the only new car my dad ever bought. And he had a Renault Le Car that was, by a country mile, the worst car that was ever made. That car absolutely stunk. But again, it was a car that was near and dear to my heart, just because it was just a absolute. It was a great car. It's quirky. You got to think about the fact that they took the engine out of the front and they stuffed the engine in the back. Okay. And that means that you're talking about the dynamics of a car that goes from a front engine, front drive to mid engine, rear drive. And they added boost to the equation. And it wasn't a big motor. It was like a 1.7 liter, if I'm not mistaken. And it, this was for homologation requirements at the time. And but what I loved about with the Group B at the time is that you were taking pedestrian cars and you were doing things that we do to cars now, right? You had fender flares, you lower it, you had a wing, you had a splitter, you wider tires, wider wheels. That's what Renault did, and that's how you had to homologate a lot of the cars back then. The E30 M3 is a perfect example of that, and it just absolutely turned this car from, really absolutely nobody of the econo car era to a fire-breathing turbocharged rally mobile. Adam, you've had experience with this car in Gran Turismo, right?
Sure. Yeah. I've also seen them in real life at car meets, and they are like nothing else, literally. And the owners are just as enthusiastic as you are. But when I've met the owners, they are like super fans of the vehicle, and that's also really special. Is that some people just get a car because it's the it car. Oh, I got an Aventador. That's the it car right now. That's what you get to go with your Breitling or Rolex.
Right.
This car, on the other hand, you really gotta love it. And I contend that people that like these cars, the Renault 5s and the Renault 5 turbos, I think that they really have an appreciation for what the car was, and how much of an impact it made on the car scene.
For sure. Brooklyn, any impressions of the Renault Turbo?
I've got to agree with the Wolf on this one. I watched. We've earlier this year or last year, we shared videos of. I think I shared with the squad video of a gentleman who was being interviewed by a woman who does car YouTube videos, but he was so enthusiastic about it, telling her his journey, how he hunted it down, how he wanted one for years, how he basically spared no expense, and the difference between, I think I don't know if they call it the Series 1 and the Series 2, or the version, or the Turbo and the Turbo 2.
Yeah, there's a Turbo 2. Yeah.
But the cars are impressive, right? Just what Renault was able to do to make this car exist, and then to have the road going version. Yeah, they really are. I remember the Lacar from the 80s, seeing them in New York, but that
Really?
car was, oh yeah. There were a lot of them there. Well, you got to remember, the thing about New York City is whatever there is, there's comparatively a bunch of. Like my twin sister and I wanted 2000 Inca Orange 2002 BMW 2002 TIIs because we saw them. We saw them driving around Brooklyn when we were kids, and we're like, that's a cool looking car. So yeah, I've seen the Lacar version. I've seen once at a Cars and Coffee the Renault 5 Turbo, and it is a sight to behold. Right? There's no regular spec. The seats are in amazing shape, and they're going to be in an amazing color with an interesting pattern.
Yeah.
I'd bet that every one that left the factory was individually a work of art in one way or another.
Yeah, it just goes to show you the extremes that manufacturers were willing to go to back then, just to get, you could imagine, and I know that there's still rallying going on and FIA rally, and they take regular Hondas and Seats and and the likes, and they put them out there. But clearly it was just a different vibe back then. As somebody who grew up in the back of a Le car, I can tell you that props to Renault for making that thing rally worthy. That was a lot of work involved in that. That was no small feat, right? They were not taking the Focus and make it into a Focus rally. That car was horrible, right? But again, it was a cool car. Looking back on it, just with again, like, disrespect to the 80s era, it was a cool car, and they're a bear to drive. Just my experience being with simulation games, video games, but any car that has the engine with boost hanging over the rear axle and the front end, the only thing that's really holding it down is a battery and a gas tank. It completely changes the driving dynamics. You're just like, you're hanging on here, so yeah, that's me. That's what I like right there. I love both of those cars. I wish I could have them in my driveway. Adam Wolf, you got to talk to me. This is going to be good. Tell me what you got.
Okay, I know you just presented 2 cars, and I did prepare for 3 cars, but I'll do the first 2 very quickly. And it's funny that you mentioned Group B and you showed some racing stuff and stuff like that, because we all know of the maxim, race on Sunday, sell on Monday, right? And I think we were all part of the generation of having a poster on your wall, right, of your favorite car or a dream car or something like that, right? So, of course, my first 2 picks are sort of your poster vehicles, right? And I'll start with
Love it.
I'll start with the Ferrari F40.
Okay, I got you.
All right, so there were 1,300 produced. They were a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car with a twin-turbo V8 and a 5-speed manual transmission. They were not a response to the next vehicle I'll present, but at the time they were kind of thought to be a response to another vehicle. And all of the cars left the factory in Rosa Corsa. You could have any color you wanted as long as it was Ferrari red.
Yeah.
Minus 7 that were sent to the Sultan of Brunei.
Wow.
So
What color was his?
I didn't say what color, but he needed them specifically in right-hand drive.
Huh.
So fun fact about the Sultan of Brunei, but he has been the same dude, the same actual dude our entire lives.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the F40.
The Sultan is still alive and well, isn't he?
Since 1967, he has been this has been the same guy. His excellency, I think is his how you address him. So that's the Ferrari F40, right? And if you want, you can go on YouTube and you can find a whole list of videos to watch. A couple of my favorites are from Chris Harris. Chris Harris drove the F40 in very spectacular fashion, and there's some other drivers, journalists from the time that have great experiences with the F40, and what they all say, and what you can experience yourself, is that almost all of the video is unusable. Thank you. Almost all of the video is unusable because they are hooting and hollering the entire time. So Chris Harris did one, and then also there's another one by Richard Hammond of Top Gear fame.
Yep.
And he drove one next to. He actually got to drive both of the vehicles that I'm presenting here back to back. So the second vehicle I'll present, and you can kind of probably already guess.
I can guess, yeah.
But the Ferrari F40 was not made in competition with this vehicle.
I didn't know it was dress rehearsal here. I completely.
I like it though. I respect the hustle.
All right, so we got the. Hope you can see that.
Goodness.
The Porsche 959. So the Porsche 959, there were significantly fewer of these made. There were 345 produced. They are rear engine, 4-wheel drive, twin turbocharged, flat six-speed manual transmission. And notably, they were made to compete in Group B rally cars.
which is crazy.
What was the first year of the 959?
I
87,
think
right?
it was 85 or 86, yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, maybe 86. So that was the first production car that was a 6-speed manual then.
I don't know that offhand.
It must have been, because it was either the more regular production cars was this Corvette ZR1 had a 6-speed manual, and the BMW 850i had a 6-speed manual, and those were considered the first, even though the 850i dropped first. So because I know the F40 was a 5-speed, so if the 959 was a 6-speed,
It was
the first.
It was, they had the first gear was not
crawler.
They had a crawl gear. It was, they call it Grundelungel or something like that, where it was, which
sure
really
that's
was
German.
first gear. So they called first gear, no, they called second gear first gear. And the reason behind that was because there was noise regulations you had to get by in first gear. Like, so the noise regulations in Europe at the time was you put it in first gear and you drive by like this little sound meter. And the twin turbo flat 6 was so loud. Remember, this was the race engine from the 956, if I'm not mistaken, or one of Porsche's race cars. And it was so loud, they were like, this is not going to pass. So there was like, well, it has to be in first gear. So Porsche said, no worries. They made first gear they called it Grundelundel or something like that, which means crawl. And then they made second gear first gear. So they're like, put it in first gear. They're like, no problem. They put it in first, which is really second, lower RPMs, and it's quieter.
Okay, so
Trickery.
I did have that is my second car, the Porsche 959, and I was very happy to see my first 959 with you two gentlemen. I believe it was last year in 2023. Yep.
I did not realize that was your first 959 encounter. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, I tried to see him before, but I just somehow kept on missing him, and so I was positively blessed in that instance because I got to see 6 of them.
Yeah,
so
that was amazing.
It was that was a really amazing experience for me. So anyway, that's my first 2. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Thank you for popping one up in white. Just an amazing car, and amazing technologically. Seriously, you could just wax on poetic about these vehicles and all the technology that they had or the technology that they lacked. But yeah, those are pretty comparable cars, I believe, to me. And then my third car, I really had to think about something that was like a world changer. And the way I'll explain that is that the Ferrari F40 was the predecessor to the F50, okay, which was also a legendary car. Okay. The Porsche 959, it was the predecessor to the Porsche 911 GT1, okay, which they only made like a dozen of. But an amazing vehicle. And my third vehicle is still living today. It came back out of hibernation. It came back
Dodge Viper. No.
And was delivered to the rest of the world via tugboat, much like its moniker. So my third vehicle is the Nissan Skyline GTR. So it barely qualifies. Okay, they started making them in August of 1989. I'm sorry, I don't have a Godzilla shirt, but they started making them in August of 1989. And I read this very interesting thing. It says, in 1989, the Japanese Best Motoring Television Program, which I know we've all seen clips of, conducted a test of the Nürburgring Nordschleife with a production version Nissan Skyline GTR R32. Driven by Motoharu Kurosawa, the car completed a lap time of 8:22.38 around the semi-wet, damp condition circuit. making it the fastest production vehicle around the track at the time.
And it did it in the wet.
So that was the R32, right? So some stats about the R32 is that it had great production. It had just less than 44,000 produced. It had a front engine. It was all-wheel drive. And it also had a turbo inline 6 and 5-speed manual transmission. So something interesting I read in my studies was that it was designed to dominate Group A racing. And there's a lot of there's classes and stuff like that, and they adjusted the engine size so that they could compete with other Group A vehicles of similar weight. And then they actually upped the engine displacement because they were turboing the car. And when you turbo the car, there was some kind of calculation, 1.7 times the horse, or a turbo effectively increased the displacement competition range by 1.7 times. Anyway,
so was this a 2.6 liter or 2.8 liter when it first came?
It was 2.6. It was 2.6.
Yeah, 2.6.
So another fun fact that I read about the R32 GTR is about the V-spec, and we've always heard about the V-spec, but I don't know if you know what the V stands for.
What?
Very fast.
The V-spec in the nomenclature means victory specification.
No kidding.
So they made those in the early 90s after they dominated on the track.
Really?
And just like I was talking about with the Ferrari F40 and the Porsche 959, these started a grand tradition of new Skylines. The Skyline was out of production since 1973. I'm sorry, the GTR was out of production since 1973, and it came back for the 1989 production. And as we know now, it's still in production. So the R33, the R34. R35, just legends of street and track. So those are my three cars.
Yeah, that's I mean, really, that might be the halo of 80s. And you're right, the Skyline squeaked in that's basically me getting to any doctor's appointment that I have is clocking in right at the last second. But you're right, it does qualify. That is an 80s sports car. And the Ferrari F40 with its twin turbo V8, the Porsche 959 twin turbo flat six, Nissan Skyline twin turbo straight six. I mean,
the R32 was one turbo, right?
Yeah, it was one turbo.
It was one turbo?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. I thought it was a twin turbo. Single turbo, straight six, single turbo. In any event, that's really performance. I mean, those are all race cars. Let's just be real. Those are all race cars for the street. You can't write the history. You'll hear me say this all the time of performance cars without mentioning those three. So excellent selection. You went straight for the jugular, and I can appreciate that.
You did.
Brooklyn, guess what? You get to follow up.
So I love the Skyline. As you guys know, because you know me personally, I owned no less than six simultaneously. I owned six Nissan 240 SXs, which were baby Skyline's little brother. In fact, when you look at the interior of the R32,
it does. It looks like it.
It
exactly
reminds me of the interior of my S38 240 SXs, which would be Sylvia and 180 SX in Japan. For some reason, as you remember, as we discussed the assignment for today, I thought we agreed not to go high end, and I thought we went regular pedestrian cars. So
for Adam, that is regular pedestrian. That's a Tuesday for him.
959 F40, we've all discussed ad nauseum, and we love those cars. We absolutely love those cars to the point where I am sure they will continue to come up as we continue to do this podcast for years and years. I love everything you said about them. I love the information that was produced. Today, what I am going to talk to the congregation about is the 1988, 87, 88, 89 Chrysler Conquest TSI.
I had that one. I had it.
You never had me. You never had
it.
your car.
I had it. Yeah.
I've tried to share my screen. Or you can pull one up, but I pulled some up on Bring a Trailer. Some quick info. I mean, to me, that car seemed like a supercar back in the day. It had everything we love, right? It was turbo when people weren't doing turbo cars. It had flip up headlights. It had
box fenders.
Go up to the top here for me. Go up to the top. This is a Bring a Trailer post, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hit the click here, and but there are more like it here. Click that, and then go to that line, and then now pick one. No, go. We're going to top. We're going to top price. Top price there. There's a blue one. Click on that. Yeah. Just so we get the best example possible. These cars are beautiful. Four corners. Box fenders. Just a beautiful car. 188 horsepower at 5,000 RPM. 235 foot-pounds of torque.
That's no joke.
At 2,500 RPM. So really at that low street racing, stoplight to stoplight level. This car, when I used to see the car, right, and those wheels are the stock wheels. I used to see this car on the street, and just, again, in New York City, you'd see them all the time. It was one of the hot cars to have. I don't know the timing, how close it came out to when the 940, a Porsche 944 came out, but there were some cars that where everybody seems to be stealing from each other's homework in those days, right?
Right. Yeah.
Super. Now, this started off as a Mitsubishi Starion. Like, this is a Chrysler. You look at it and you see Japanese car. This is a Chrysler. They improved on some of the things from the Mitsubishi Starion. You could get regular, dial gauges on this. I think the Starion had an option for, like Star Wars gauges or whatever. But this, for whatever reason, to my eye, the Chrysler was the nicer car. It had, they just made everything smoother and nicer. I don't know who was in charge of this design, but this is a 2.6 liter 4-cylinder. This thing went 0 to 60 in, I wrote it down somewhere. I want to say 8 seconds.
Yeah, it was about 7 seconds, 7-ish. Yeah,
it was pretty quick for the time. But I think the main thing with this car is the car just looks the bee's knees. I don't believe it has a bad angle. It had, at the time, it had I'm pretty sure it had staggered. It definitely had staggered wheels, beefy in the back. Every corner you look at, it was just sleek, right? Spaceship in 1988. Love that car. I don't have any personal experience ever driving one, but I love that car. Any comments on the Conquest TSI, gentlemen?
Let me hop in here. My aunt's boyfriend had a Chrysler Conquest. It wasn't a TSI, so they made two versions. They made a TSI and they made a regular turbo version that didn't have the high output turbo engine, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't have the box fenders, didn't have the aero add-ons, but it did have the interior was it was just the bolsters on the seat. It was like it was like a backpack, on you. It just hugged you. The velour seats, it had on the seat belts it said turbo all the way down, and they were the ones that went up, in the automatic belts like that.
Passive restraint.
And the car was just, it was so, much in the vein of the Trans Am that I shared earlier. Pop-up headlights, box fenders, wing, aero add-ons, the rims, the wheels have the lip, it had it's just, it's like they're like Hot Wheels, they're just like cars that if a car guy was designing a sports car and he had the IQ of the temperature of the room he was in, this is what it would look like. It's just, everything that looks cool and nothing that doesn't. That's where it's at with these cars. So that car was very cool. My like I said, my uncle had one. Very, very cool car. I had this on my list and I said it's too much like the Trans Am, and I took it off because the Mitsubishi Starion, the first year I think they came out, they had like these dome dish wheels. They didn't have these dome dish wheels. Very, very cool. This is what was wild about the 80s performance era is that Mitsubishi, of course, designed and engineered this car. And at the same time, they also sold the Eclipse GST Turbo. So you could walk into a Mitsubishi showroom and there would be a Mitsubishi Starion, that looks like, looks really like the Chrysler version. And an Eclipse GS, they're both sitting there like front wheel drive turbo, rear wheel drive turbo. What do you want? So amazing time in automotive history. So I love, great choice. I love that.
But yeah, when Mitsubishi actually made super cool vehicles. Wolf, what do you say?
I seem to remember, wasn't there an option or wasn't there an all-wheel drive version of these two cars?
No, not these cars. No.
Okay. The Eclipse had a GSX.
Check that. They may have been an all-wheel drive rally.
That's what I thought.
There was a rally version that was all-wheel drive. It could be.
Correct. Did they sell? Did they sell in America? Maybe in Japan. Did they sell in the U.S. an all-wheel drive version of this car?
No. They did not.
Oh, okay. Because that would have been, I'd have been today years old.
And that shot right there, you can see the seat belts that had turbo.
Oh yeah.
You can see the turbo on there.
Oh yeah, that's really cool.
I vividly, it was. Adam, you're right. It is 4-wheel drive. The Group B was 4-wheel drive. So yeah, that.
Pull that up. Put that on the screen if you have a photo of that.
Let me see if I can.
Oh wow.
Here, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the rally version was. Let me see. Share this tab instead. Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Are those the wheels you were speaking of?
They're in that vein. They don't look exactly like that, but I can I'll pull it back up here and I'll pull it back up at the end. But yeah, the wheels were like that. They were like this dome shaped, clearly designed for cooling the brakes. But 4-wheel drive. And again, Group B, this is the stuff we talked about. Group A with the this is the things that were driving the performance of that era. Even
so there must have been a civilian version for sale. If this
probably in Japan, that might have been. This was 84, so that was really at the beginning of Group B. But in even with the Pontiac Trans Am, the Pontiac Firebird, really, I say Trans Am, it's really Pontiac Firebird. But Trans Am was what? It was a Trans Am series of racing, which that's why you had and even with Chevy Camaro IROC Z, it was an international race of champions. It's race based for the street. Good, great choice. Great choice.
Thank you. My next magic trick, I'm going with the 1988 Ford Mustang GT / 1988 Saline Mustang 5-speed.
Wow, nice.
Right? Nice. If we go to bring a trailer again,
yeah, I got you.
We can bring up some of those. The reason why as a young lad, as a very young lad, in high school, my neighbor Michelle, she lived at the end of the block. Um, she was a few years older. You know, I started high school at 13. Michelle, I think for her 16th birthday, Michelle is Puerto Rican. She for her 16th birthday, for her 16th birthday, she got a black on gray cloth like that, the gray tweed. She got a black Mustang GT, brand new. Listen, if anybody gave 16-year-old Brooklyn Taylor, 16-year-old Adam Armour, 16-year-old Carl Legister this car, pull up the black one for me. They have some black ones for sale there. But this car was amazing. And let me tell you, Michelle drove this car as if it was, that's the exact car. That is literally the car. Michelle drove this car as if it, and it was also a 5-speed manual version.
Wow.
Michelle drove this car as if it was a Buick LeSabre on the way to church. we left Brooklyn and drove through Manhattan, and we both went to school in Queens. I went to school in Long Island City, which is a part of Queens, and she went to school, you know, not too far from me. That's why occasionally I could get a ride to school and not have to take the hour-and-a-half subway ride. Well, that car is also very small inside. Even when I was a skinny youth, I was like, this is, especially if for whatever reason I had to get in the back seat, which is non-existent in a Mustang GT for anybody, you know, not a toddler. But that, I have great memories of this car. This car had 5-liter V8, you know, had the 5.0 emblems on the side, 225 horsepower. Most importantly, 300 foot-pounds of torque. These cars are very light, very fast. Every teenager or person in their early 20s that was not Michelle was wrapping these things around poles in New York, right? Like, because again, as I said earlier in the pod, these things were running the streets. I mean, the Mustang GT, the Firebird and Trans Am, and the Buick Grand National. What a time to be alive.
Right.
You'd see these things, driving down the street, brand new. And as a young car guy, it was amazing. Like, it was an amazing time to be a car enthusiast. I mean, I remember to this day, I remember at the time seeing a Lamborghini Miura on the street, you know, just on the street in Manhattan in traffic. And I'm like, whoa, you know, but yeah, this car, the Mustang GT, quintessential American sports car. Now in 2024, the only surviving American pony car. RIP to the Camaro and the Challenger. You know,
the name lives on.
What's that?
I said the name lives on.
Stop.
Yeah, you know, and in the Mustang has it's Ford's. You know, we kind of talked, you know, a few weeks ago or a while back about Ford and what's worked for them and what, you know, where they're headed as a manufacturer. The Ford Mustang has survived the test of time. They've tried to axe it and make it the Ford Probe. How the Ford Probe name got out of the cut edit room is beyond me. And you know, so here you have the Mustang is a little bit like the 911. There's always a board member that's trying to cut it off at the neck, and then there's some engineers and there's some performance guys and some diehards that, like, you don't understand. Without this, you are nothing. You know,
Right.
this is what you hang your hat on, so to
Yeah.
speak. And the Mustang is good, bad, and different. I know that it's a very accessible sports car by 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, and it's easy horsepower. And if you turn off the traction control, you'll end up on YouTube. That's
Right.
just where it's at today. But
Yeah.
back then, you know, 200 some odd horsepower, 300 something pound feet of torque, that was more than plenty to win almost every stoplight drag race. And the thing about that 302 small block was that it sounded great.
Oh yeah.
It sounded
It
phenomenal.
was iconic.
You know, it's not like these V8s these days that just sound like a diesel truck. It sounded, it was pure, it was honest, it was zippy, and another great choice. You know, I want to point out the body add-ons, the rear wing, the front spoiler, the rear spoiler, the body cladding. You know, tacky, maybe. Does it look great? Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean the LX is a choice. I like the notchback, the notchback LX 5.0, no frills. You know, this is what I look like on the inside. But this from Vanilla Ice to Michelle, my neighbor, to just the 80s, this Mustang GT, and even with the add-ons, and I'm not a body kit guy, but here's my final thought about the year 88 and 89. 88 and 89 in a way was like 68 and 69, right? 68,
Yeah.
69.
Yes.
You got Challengers, you got one of my favorites, the 69 Camaro, you got the Pontiac GTO, you got the Mustang. These vehicles were all hot rods. They were muscle cars, pony cars. They were fighting for supremacy. You might have to go against a road runner one night, a Challenger the next night, a Charger the next night, you know, a GTO. You got to go against a Galaxy 500, whatever it is. You're fighting for supremacy, and the Mustang was there. But the Mustang GT was there in 68, 69, and it was there in 88 and 89, and it was there in 2009 and 2019 and in 2024. So there's just a timeline in the Mustang cinematic universe that just goes, you know, and that's why that car is so iconic to me, you know. I just love that 88 Mustang GT, and it means a lot to me. You know, if I was I would probably buy an LX with the trunk, not with the hatchback. All the Mustang GT are not strangely, but all the Mustang GTs were hatchback. They didn't make them besides the convertible. Only the convertible you could get with the trunk.
Right.
Oh yeah, I'm this was on my short list as well, the Fox Body Mustang. And my personal thought about the Fox Body Mustang is that it's almost like a body in white. You could strip it down, you could do whatever the heck you wanted with it. You could put a bigger engine in it. I mean, and people are doing it now. They're taking this chassis and they are doing whatever the heck they want with them, and they are winning. I mean, they are beautiful cars.
Yeah,
they look terrific with bigger wheels. They perform well. They have good rigidity. Even with lots more horsepower, and it's just stood the test of time. So I really support your Fox Body pick. That's a great pick.
Thank you, sir.
So I'm not crowning
bang for the buck. Always at the top of the bang for the buck. Always.
Listen, I'm not crowning you the winner of this conversation, but referencing back to this was back in 88, and Motor Trend, they gathered all of these performance cars from that era and they weighed them cost per performance point, in the Ford Mustang LX 5.0 won because it was the cheapest car and it was the fastest for how much you were spending. So
it would win today.
It
would win today.
It was by far and away it was a step above. It was so much faster than any other cars, and it was the regular 5.0 Chevrolet Camaro was so much slower than the Ford Mustang. And you can see a good picture of it.
Number 11 spot in the top 10.
Yeah, it was number 11.
That's the IROC Z. That's no slouch Camaro.
Yeah. So and you know, as Adam said, it's a car that you can find on, you know, it's part of Americana and the racetracks, the drag strips. You could drop a LS in there. You can, you know, put a Coyote in there, and it's just, and there's a gazillion of them around. So parts, you know, it's a part of the American landscape for sure. And good choice. Good, you know, you without a doubt, that's a really, really good choice. I love that car as well.
The closer.
Yeah, it's definitely a slam dunk. But I did want to show you, this is the Stereon wheels I was referencing.
Yeah, that's nice.
There, it's kind of a little bit kind of got that BBS spec to it, but
monoblock.
Yeah, monoblock. That's it. That monoblock type to it. So,
but look at all of these. These are some. This is Radwood heaven. These are all great looking cars.
Yeah,
I love that era of Super Turbo as well.
A little bit of extra bonus points here. I'll run through some of these cars. The C4 Corvette, which had the same 350, a little bit more horsepower than the Camaro and the Firebird. But you know, that was, you know, version 1 of the C4. We all know that the ZR1 was king. You see the LX 5.0. The IROC, which IROC was cool too. Just I wasn't.
Hit me. Go back there for a second, Dre, if you will, please, sir, and hit me with the differences between the IROC Z. Why were they using the convertible IROC Z?
That was all that was available. That was all that they didn't want. That was all they could get from.
What are the weight differences between those two cars? Because the Corvette's fiberglass. So how light was that Corvette?
That Corvette was, let's see here, dimensions, wheelbase, curb weight, 3471 for the Camaro and 3200 for the Vet. So, and the Vet was at 295 horsepower. And actually, this was the 305 in the IROC Z.
So the Corvette was 240 horsepower, it says.
Yeah.
And the IROC was 290. Wait, no, 195. Okay, gotcha.
But that was the 305. I didn't realize that. I thought they had the 5.7 liter in the IROC, which it must have been all that. I'm sure if I go back and read. But, you know, a couple more rad era Ford Thunderbird SC, Ford Pro.
I love
GT.
the SC.
Yeah, Mazda MX-6 GT. All of these cars.
My brother's friend had a bodybuilder guy had that exact MX-6 GT in red as well.
Right,
cool looking car.
Yeah, good stuff. So, so Adam, you know, where do you stand and where do you fall with? I'm gonna share with our viewers and listeners something that Adam said to me. There's certain things that Adam says that always stick with me, right? One of the things he's told me, and I live by it and I will die by it, is if my hands are full, I'm done shopping.
I now live by that as well.
Listen, you can apply that to so many other things, right? It really works at Winn-Dixie. It's even better when I'm hauling, you know, fishes for, you know, whatever it is I'm hauling. My hands are full, I'm done shopping. But another thing that Adam has told me is my goal is to what? Only own cars from the 80s. He's like, sure. My goal here is to only own cars from the 80s. So why do you feel that way? Besides the obvious.
I mean, we kind of talked about it earlier. It's just a different time, and I truly believe that in the 80s, cars were being made tougher. You know, they weren't penny pinching quite as much. I mean, I'm sure there's you know 95 examples of disproving that theory, but in my experience, they were making cars very tough to last. Okay. And we've talked about this also, is that, you know, those cars are still on the road. You know, a lot of them are 40, you know, high 30s, low 40 years old, and they're still on the road and they can still do what they got to do. Right. And lots of times you can improve them and they will still just, you know, take it. Right. And I contend that, you know, now cars, you can't do that. You know, you're not going to find a great example is like the Focus. Those Focuses, the Ford Focus has disappeared from the road.
Yeah,
in my
you don't see them
experience.
anymore. You don't.
Right? They are just gone. We had this car called a Chevy Corsica. It was also an 80s car. I believe it was an 86 car.
That was a
Terrible car. All
horrible
right.
car.
It tried to kill me the first couple of times I tried to drive it. I leaned on it just like a little bit in a corner and it tried to kill me. Right. But it also a tough car though. You know, it was very solidly made. But as I was saying, you know, those Ford Focus, you know, those were made to be, you know, driven for a while, get 100,000, maybe 200,000 miles, and then you just throw them away. And I believe that those 80s cars were not made that way. I believe that they were made to stand the test of time. You know, people really wanted a lot of value out of their vehicles, and you could feel it as soon as you drove it. You know, the styling was terrific, you know, to my eyes. I might be in the presence of two other guys that agree with me. But, you know, a lot of cars, you know, just look like each other now, you know, just like a melted ice cube. And there's a picture I have on my phone in my favorites. It's like 20 SUVs from all the different marks, and they all look exactly the same. Same profile, exactly. But you know, these cars, you know, just in your bang for the buck example that you were showing, they all had different shapes. You know, you could tell what everything was.
Exactly.
And there was a little bit of, you know, people copying off each other's homework. That's definitely a thing. But I truly believe that the 80s was a high point for, you know, just terrific manufacturing, terrific ideas, people trying to stretch the limits for vehicles. And I don't know if we'll have that time again.
Absolutely. Brooklyn,
Well said,
you want to
King.
send us home?
Well said. I am with the Wolf on this. The 80s was an iconic time. We were young and impressionable, and there were so many different teams to choose from. You know, I definitely had a 1988 BMW M5 on my wall. I took it out of a magazine, the Pirelli. I had the 750 IL poster. It was huge. It was a white 750 IL 1988 that I got at the New York International Auto Show. There were so many really cool things happening in the late 80s. You know, you had turbo cars like the Conquest and Starion. You had the Porsche doing its thing, as always. You had BMW saying, we're going to have a V12 before Mercedes. That was mind-blowing, right? You know, you had the 850, the 750. You were coming off of the you know, my personal favorite, the 1988 M6. You just had such great things. If you walked into a BMW dealership in 1988, you could get an M3, an M5, or an M6. If you were rich enough, you could get them all. You know, give this one to your kid, give this one to your wife. You drive this other one. You know, you could do whatever you felt like.
I don't know if it went down like that, but I get the point.
Somebody did it. You know, at least one person did that.
Yeah.
Right. So it was just a great time. We had Countachs on our walls. We had Testarossas on our walls. We had F40s. We had 959s. Every magazine was a head-to-head with a really cool car and another really cool car. They did the 10 best. They had let us not forget. Shout out to the Roof Yellowbird. I mean, you know, what a time.
So great convo, guys. I loved everybody's submission. I think there was a dynamic range there from grocery getters to technological marvels. We've established where our heart lies with the 80s cars. So really
my
good
third
stuff.
pick was the Cressida, but out of respect,
your third pick was the Cressida.
I didn't drop my Cressida bars.
That would have been a good one too.
I mean, you know, well, you know, you said to bring it down to 2, so some of us can follow rules around here. No shade.
Folks, I am Dre Zoom. That is Adam the Wolf and Brooklyn Taylor. We will catch you next time. S38 Fire Team out.
Thank you for having us.